I just like to be part of the process of keeping the community informed. I like writing is probably my number one hobby. So I have a chance to write, and I cover a lot of ground from news stories to political commentary to theater reviews, kind of a broad range of areas which I do write about, and that becomes a very good outlet for me to do so.
My main reason for getting involved with Out Loud was Mike and my loyalty to him. He's been a dear friend. But wanting to continue it has been because I think the community benefits with having multiple voices. And I think that we provide a service in that regard. You know, if we went away, there's still the gay paper now called Gay Life, and so the community wouldn't be without. But I think we provide a unique perspective. It's a little different than theirs. And it provides a voice for a broader group of people because there are two papers.
That's a very good question. The paper involved about 2 weeks a month of very intensive involvement. Basically every night you went down and worked on the paper for 2 weeks, one way or the other. And then you had a couple of weeks in which only the billing needed to be taken care of. We kept involved because I think there was a lot of camaraderie among the newspaper volunteers. We all felt like we were stuck in Gail's basement, or even worse, when we moved to the center basement, which was a step down from Gail's basement. We got along very well with each other, and so there was a mutual support about that. And I think everyone simply thought that, you know, we have to put out the next issue and put out the next issue. It wasn't you didn't think in terms of we're going to stick this out for 4 years. It was, we got to get this issue done and then next issue done. And it continued that way. I don't think it had a goal. It had lots of different goals, and different people were committed for different reasons. There were people who were interested in the arts, and they wanted to see coverage of that, and so they would come in and to write a story or to put in photographs or graphics or whatever. And that was their goal of the paper, and that's what they did. And so I'm sure if you analyzed issue by issue, you'd see some shifting trends because some people moved in and some people moved out. But the general purpose of communicating with the community about what was of interest to us, I think, was always maintained.
So I think it's always been about getting information out to the community. I think it also has been about mobilizing the community. And I think that's probably still the same, but the issues have changed. You know, when you're a very small and pretty intensely oppressed minority with, you know, very little visibility and very little mainstream acceptance or understanding, you know, the focus will be more on trying to get the straight community to accept you by just being visible and getting legal protections for your job, because people got fired all the time, and maybe to repeal the sodomy laws. What was interesting to me was the movement quickly moved from sodomy repeal to job protection, and I think it was because people felt it was more palatable to this mainstream and to the legislature. But to me, sodomy repeal was equally as important because people could be sent to jail, you know, for just being who you were. And but so I still think that's what the gay press is doing. It's just the issues now are in marriage equality and those types of things. And quite frankly, you know, when we got started, even the idea of gay marriage never even crossed my mind. You know, it's just never even thought of it because it was a much different world. So I think the focus is still pretty much that. I mean, maybe some people may differ and think that now it's not so much advocacy journalism, but to me it is. It's about providing information and also advocating for change.
Very rarely there was some fiction. There were religious columns and religious news. MCC, of course, had been active for many years. Dignity was active in those days. It's hard to think of a category that we didn't cover, and there wasn't much sports. There were occasional things, but subsequent papers have had more of that than we did in those days. But we had cartoons when we could get them.
You'll have news, you'll have commentary, you'll have, the lifestyle or the artistic area, the arts cultural area. And that's, for the most part, that's your basic components of the newspaper, then and today. We had a group of volunteers that were volunteer writers who did their own assigning for the most part. Occasionally the editor would either write a story that if someone else couldn't do on an assigned basis, he would do or I would do at that time. The same thing applies to Baltimore Out Loud. It's the same situation. We have a number of writers who do this as a volunteer basis. They contribute articles on their own. But if there's some news going out, we either try and get it assigned or we do it ourselves to get it done. But it's not, the readers themselves don't provide articles. They don't submit. Some readers do become writers because they have submitted something and said, would you please consider writing? And, it's reviewed and so on. And depending on the situation, then they go ahead with it. Advertising is essential. It's the only source of income and revenue for the newspaper. There are no subscriptions, so advertising is its only source. So yes, there was advertising in every newspaper has it.
So going back to the gay paper's founding, one of the concerns I had was that we would be co-opted by advertisers, that the advertisers could then control the voice of the paper. So I got the center to pass a resolution that the paper could have no ads bigger than a quarter page, so that there would not be this, somebody coming up and buying ads, and then we would get addicted to the money. But that was kind of unrealistic because there was a need for the money. So once people needed the money, that went by the wayside. But that, and obviously running a paper now, we very much need the advertisers. I can't say I've ever had an advertiser say you can't print this, but obviously advertising is important to be able to have money to put out the paper.
As I said, Harvey Schwartz sold the ads, sold virtually all of the ads for the paper. He was the executive director, and basically he paid for his salary by selling ads to the paper. He was an extraordinarily good salesperson, and we never had a lack of advertising. We had some people who simply had a standing ad, and every month we would have the quarter page or the 8th page or whatever it is. But once Harvey was gone, I'm sure you've heard the story about Harvey's being asked to leave the center. Well, there were a lot of issues. It was a very political situation. But in '82, I believe, he was voted out of his position as executive director, and that meant that the newspaper lost its advertising representative. And for the next several years, until Mike Chase came along, advertising was more difficult simply because we didn't have a salesperson of that quality to do it. You have to be very aggressive, and you have to know a lot of people in the community, and the people who followed Harvey never had his level of expertise or commitment or connections or whatever it was that made him so successful. The advertising market was there from the beginning. Finding someone to actually capitalize on it effectively was sometimes difficult. The mailing list was the center at the beginning, but very quickly the press run ran to 4,000 and 5,000, and bundles of papers used to just go to places that would distribute them. And so that included mostly the bars, but also Video Americain, for instance, had for years and years and years given them a space where you could pick up papers. So sympathetic organizations around the city would take stacks of them and just put them out for people to take. They were religiously mailed to city council representatives, to libraries, to schools, all of whom I suspect immediately tossed them into the trash can, but we were making an effort of outreach.
Ours varies between 5,000 and 7,000, maybe 7,500 over the years. Right now, we've been kind of consistently at 5,000 because, you know, we have to. We're bare bones. We want to keep the cost down, and we distribute, you know, throughout the city, and also in, some of the counties and Pennsylvania. And I think we still distribute some in D.C., although I'm not sure how much. We clearly distribute in Howard County, Anne Arundel County, Baltimore County, Harrisburg, York, PA. We had been distributing it in Rehoboth, so we have a fairly, you know, wide circulation. But we definitely distribute in Central City, you know, where the bars are, and you know, some of the neighborhoods too. You know, like I distribute Charles Village and Hamden myself, and then we have a driver who distributes throughout the rest of the areas.
Some or more of us got together in Gail's basement, and there was, we usually had a backlog of copy from the regular contributors, the columnists, so that we would have something to start with every month. And that would go into the typesetting room where somebody would sit at the iTech and put out copy with that. We had people who would come in and do just grammatical type editing of things we had received. The getting stories written, which is what people think of as putting in a paper, was the least of our concerns. We relied on press releases from organizations, anybody around town who was doing, you know, if MCC had some speaker in town, they would write up a little blurb and they'd send it to us, and we would dutifully type it up and put it in there. We did not do investigative reporting to any extent because we didn't have any staff that could do such a thing. So it had to do with taking whatever materials we had. People would write book reviews, you could typeset that. And then somewhere in the week before it went to press, we would have the layout. And that consisted of literally cutting and pasting strips of typeset material and fitting them onto a page. It was, in the early days, one of our big advances was going from rubber cement to wax. Rubber cement, once you do it, you're stuck with it, basically. Whereas wax, you can pull it off and put it on and pull it off. And we spent many hours pulling off and putting on in order to get a page that looked decent and in order to fill up an even 4 number of pages, so that things would get kicked out of an issue because we ran out of space. And we're only doing 32 pages this week. Sorry, this is page 33. I'll have to wait till next week. We had a whole ad department, people typesetting ads and doing graphics for ads and pasting those all up, and they would come in their little quarter pages or 8th page sizes or whatever, and those would get laid out on it. It's the same things that anyone does with desktop publishing today, but without the convenience of cut and paste and being able to undo all those nice things that you can do with desktop. And desktop was only a few years away.